be very truthful with you guys, this is a video I did not want to make at all. Nothing hurts my soul more than accepting defeat, and guys, we gotta confront reality. Ferrari is a team with no hope left. To some, this is very obvious because they ain't exactly hiding it. If every year after 2008 in Formula 1 can be summarized, you'd have summaries like Mercedes and Red Bull domination, rise of extreme talent, but most notably, the fall of the Ferrari empire. The team that used to have winning in its DNA is nothing more than a shell of its former self. Everything that made Ferrari Ferrari from 1996 to 2008 is all but gone in the modern team, and this is due to many things: mismanagement, unrealistic expectations, low confidence in all its workers, corporate bullshit and corporate greed. Many things are to blame really. The team just imploded, and none are worse victims to this than its very own drivers. The drivers are the public face. If they are failing at the team, it's their career on the line, not the team's. Fernando Alonso was promised prestige at Maranello, and all he got was empty promises and a tainted career. Sebastian Vettel was promised domination, and all he got was humiliation. Charles Leclerc was told he's the future, but the past and present, which was once the future 6 years ago, has been nothing but failure after failure. Lewis Hamilton was promised new life in red, but is only going further down his own grave. And in all of these situations, the team most, if not all the time, are primarily to blame for this failure. Brand over performance, the board over the team. It's a plague that has swept Ferrari, and to this day continues to envelop it. And in the case of Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton, boy have they been victims. Of all the drivers mentioned previously, Lewis and Seb have been given the worst of it, since Seb's 2020 season and Lewis's 2025 season are the definition of torture. I wouldn't wish those seasons on my worst enemy, even just viewing as a fan. Imagine actually experiencing it. So I've done some thinking. I know that's scary, but who had the worst season? I mean, most might say Seb in 2020 since he had like 50 points while Lewis had 150, but I want to dig deeper. I want to disregard results and look at the driving. Ooh, scary watching the sport. Who genuinely drove worse and had the flat out worst season at Ferrari? Lewis in 2025 or Seb in 2020? Go join the Discord for some fun games and events, and subscribe if you're new because you don't want to see daddy mad. So enough yapping and let's get to quacking.
A good weather for a race, but especially for a talk.
Let's start chronologically with Lewis Hamilton in 2025. This season was monumental because, I mean, come on, this is Lewis Hamilton, the Lewis Hamilton leaving his empire at Mercedes to join Ferrari, the most successful team in the sport's history. This is the most match made in heaven to ever match made in heaven, and naturally, lots of expectation was placed on him to perform. And why shouldn't there be? Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time world champion, and you don't just do that on luck. Talent is absolutely involved. And while his best years are behind him, he is still a formidable driver that, even if he can't win the title, still has it in him to win races consistently and be a very useful asset. Plus, Ferrari are on the up surprisingly since they almost won the Constructors last year, so how did it go? The first race begins in Australia where, the car is not fast, guys. Who could have seen this coming? Well, truth be told, I'm speaking in hindsight. Many people believe that the car would be fast off of the back from 2024, so a P8 qualifying for Lewis is not the best look, but somehow that is the highlight of the week, since for the race, he was going nowhere. He was stuck in midfield hell, and while dirty air cars and sensitive driving in the rain could be to blame, Charles was holding on strong ahead, competing with the other drivers. Lewis, in contrast, was just in hell, waiting to get ahead of Albon, which never happened. However, I will give him some credit. Towards the end of the race where rain started to pour again, Lewis was keeping it on the road and driving super well, leading to him not spinning out like half of the bloody grid. If he can pit in for new inters off of his wet slicks, Lewis can potentially sneak a massive result similar to Russia 2021 and maybe even step on the, what's that? Ferrari left him out? This is classic Ferrari, guys. When the drivers are looking really well and performing miracles, leave it up to the strategy team to leave them in the dark and undo all the good work they have achieved. So Lewis led the race for like 1 second before Lando overtook him on inters, ironically, resulting in a 10th place. You ask me, that couldn't have been a better representation of what Ferrari is, so it was a perfect debut depending on who you ask. But being real, maybe China can be a little bit better. He won. He won the bloody race by a long shot since there was no competition. He just ran away with it. I'm not obstructing anything either, see? Look for yourself. Was the thing blocked? It says sprint, but don't worry, it's the real thing. Stop being weird, it counts, okay? But I guess looking at the main race, and yeah, it wasn't good. Despite performing leagues better, he finished in 5th behind Charles, who had damage and just couldn't replicate his pace from the sprint. But uh-oh, things got worse since he got disqualified from the session because Ferrari came up with the genius solution to their pace deficit. Let's run the car super low to the ground to find so much more performance out of the ground effects, which to be fair, they're not wrong in that. But there is this little thing called a plank, which is a slab of wood on the bottom of the car, and if it scrapes off too much, they are disqualified. Seems legit. Teams know this extensively by now, but yet they still try, and time again, we see disqualifications. Okay, so let's just revert it back, right? Yeah, no. Despite Ferrari knowing about the plank wear rules, they, for some reason, designed the SF25 to revolve around being as low to the ground as possible, which they now know cannot be done. So, what now? 7th in Japan, 5th in Bahrain, 7th in Jeddah. All these races can be defined by the team and driver just not doing enough. Lewis qualifies kinda well, but then finishes the races in these positions 10 seconds ahead from the car behind, but 10 seconds behind from the car ahead. He's just in purgatory, and it wouldn't be so bad if Charles wasn't in the top 5 regularly. So while Miami was more of the same, he even got bent over by the team to make it worse, Imola and Monaco would at least be slightly better. This time Lewis would qualify and finish much higher, he even was ahead of Charles and Imola. These are little glimpses of a Lewis of old still being in there. He just needs a car and team to work in his favor. If Ferrari can achieve this, they will see many benefits. So let's hope that these next 8 races, Ferrari can adjust. Spain is the first one, and while the team is doing fine, Lewis is still lacking the pace he needs. Where Charles was able to stay on the podium, the only trophy Lewis would get is the one for being overtaken by a Sauber. Canada is much the same, but thankfully, the odds start to swing. Usher saw a P4 and great pace from Lewis and the team, while Silverstone would be his best race all season long. He was much faster than Charles this race, and in the mixed conditions, was a star on the grid. No podium was found thanks to the dry tires being put on and the rain stopping, which of course means the car starts to kill itself, but he was still able to be strong in pace. However, a round I want to talk about extensively is the next one at Spa, because here is the definition of his season. He struggles to find one lap pace in qualifying, significantly hampering his race efforts, which is only more vindicated by the fact he does have good race pace. Spa saw Lewis qualify a low 16th, getting out of Q1, only to finish 7th in the race by displaying fast pace on wet and dry tires. Imagine if Lewis qualified 7th for this one. How high could he have finished then? It's a sad story that has already happened so much in the season, such as Miami, and will continue to proceed as we go on. Lewis just looks far worse than he did in the first 12 races, and it's almost unexplainable to me. I mean, Ferrari did bring an upgrade at Spa that maybe could have made the car worse, but other than that, it's like a switch got flicked in his brain, giving him CTE. I'm going to imagine the real issue being the quote-unquote upgrade in Spa for the suspension being the reason why he fell off, because it's real bleak now. In Hungary, he sucks in the qualifying and only gets 12th in the race. Zandvoort, he qualifies kinda good in 7th, but crashes out on his own accord, which if you know anything about Lewis, this guy never crashes his car. Monza at Ferrari's home turf is more purgatory, as is Baku, as is Singapore with the inclusion of a brake failure for Lewis. Coda saw a great P4 from him with no real complaints. However, Mexico would be very tough. By this point, Lewis is out of it, but Coda could have sparked his engine back to life since he qualified 3rd in Mexico and was set for his first podium of the season. But Max Verstappen. On lap something, Max goes for an overtake and in typical Max fashion, fails at that, leading to Max pushing him off like it's Lewis's fault at turn 4, and Lewis, not eating the bullshit, just cuts the corner and gets penalized for it. Race was practically over then, and it's really not his fault. Like, yeah, don't cut the corner, Lewis, but he was actually slowing to give the place back, but stopped once Behrman was ahead of Max, making things tricky. And from Brazil to Abu Dhabi, it's just the same race. Bad qualifying, good race pace, barely any points due to the team's mistakes, driver mistakes, and or anti-racing cars. Lewis's season this year was the definition of rage bait. Rage baited by his team telling him useless information all year long. Rage baited by other drivers being dumb. Rage baited by himself for being abnormally slow. Honestly, props to Lewis, since if it were me, I would have disappeared already and just abandoned the team. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, and despite strong performances sometimes, they were never often. It was always down to mistakes that could have been prevented. talented. So moving on to Seb Vettel's 2020 season, and he's already fired. Huh? 2019 was a difficult year for Seb, since while he won a race and sat on the podium many times, Charles in his first year in red absolutely did Seb like it was nothing. But he still won a race. He was still fast, and Charles didn't exactly dominate him, so he still had a chance to redeem himself. But nope, the team said, "I like this thing now," and fired him before the first race. To rub even more salt in that wound, the SF1000 is the type of car that haunts you in your sleep, so Seb is really gonna have to put some elbow grease into his driving if he wants a good result. So in Austria for the first round, he gets P10, which sounds bleak, but the SF1000 is like the 5th fastest at best and 9th fastest at worst, so it's fine. But Charles is in second, and half the grid died that race, so if we actually look back at it, Seb was out of the points for most of it. He even had a little spin with Sainz in turn 3, and yeah, nothing about this was good. He was flat out slow and wouldn't dare push the car out of fear of spinning, which he was already getting a rep for, and I fear it's already over. Syria, or Austria race 2, was even worse somehow, since after qualifying ahead of Charles, they're close on track. In an attempt to keep and move up positions, they crash, leading to an awesome double DNF for Ferrari. Why am I doing this to myself? Hungary would be a far better race though, since he outqualified Charles this time in 5th and was able to compete in the race and finish 6th. There was still light in Vettel's eyes, but they would get extinguished in these next 3 rounds. Silverstone only sees a 10th place from Vettel, who really only got there because Sainz had a puncture, and in the 70th anniversary race, or Silverstone race 2, he spins at the start and finishes 12th, all while Charles is in the top 5 for both races competing for big results. But dear God, it's not even the final nail in the coffin, since Spain is where Seb lost all hope in humanity. Seb that day was running well in the order. He was set for good points, and if the strategy call is right, could maybe push for more. Ferrari, however, said, "Guys, what if we leave him out there on 50 lap old tires and avoid the pit stop? By doing that, we save 20 seconds. Ah, how genius." So of course, Seb questioned when his pit stop was happening, and the team said, yeah, it's coming, until they eventually told him what he wants to do with the tires. Oh my God, bruh. Seb rightfully got mad and had to come up with the strategy on the spot, only leaving 7th to be taken for Seb. Yeah, it's over. Spa was horrible in 13th, brake failure in Monza, 10th in Mugello, but was thanks in large part to a race war killing many drivers, crash in Russia qualifying, and 13th in the race, 11th in his final home Grand Prix in Germany, some genuine points again finally in Portugal before more team bullshit with a 10+ second stop in Imola kills his chance for a top 7 result. Guys, it's so fucking bleak. None of this is funny. It's one failure after another, and by this point back in 2020, I remember genuinely crying because of this. It has never been more over. However, there is hope. Always bet on hope and optimism, since Turkey was a brilliant race, and the one race that Binotto is ironically not there for, Seb gets a podium. His qualifying was still abysmal in 12th, however, lap 1 sees him go from 11th all the way to 3rd, and he would stay right there for the entire race. He would compete and stay ahead of Lewis for a large amount of laps, and while Lewis was able to get ahead by staying out, something Checo also did, that left 3rd up for the taking. However, one issue. Charles is now in 3rd after strategy, and he is catching Checo, which Seb cannot keep up. But miraculously, on the final lap, Charles shows his inexperience as he attempts a move on Checo, but goes deep, allowing Seb through and getting on that podium for one final time in red. Call it fraudulent, I call it deserved for the hell he has had to endure this season, and it still showed that Sebastian Vettel, the 4-time world champion, is still in there. He didn't score points again for the rest of the season. 13th in Bahrain, 12th in Bahrain outer layout, 14th in Abu Dhabi, concluded his season and his time in red. Wow, Seb just struggled from low confidence straight up. It didn't help that in the few races like in Spain or Imola where he could have performed, the team messed him up, only lowering his confidence more. And of course, if you aren't confident driving, then he can't perform at all, leading to this shit show of a season. So who had it worse, Lewis in 2025 or Seb in 2020? If we are looking at strictly driving and the race themselves, I would say for sure Seb had it worse. I mean, Seb this year was driving so damn scared and just not confident at all. all. And while Lewis had races that were similar, they weren't often and nowhere to the extent of Vettel. And could I blame him for being so done with driving? When he was having a rare good race, the team made sure to hinder that effort and leave him out for dead. Like we discussed, Spain is a big one since he was driving like he was going to get big points, but hey, Horner is so good at Ferrari, why even watch the race? Hamilton was far better by comparison. Yes, the team messed plenty of his races up, but at least Lewis had the capabilities to bring it back and still compete with other drivers, and even then, Lewis just lacked the expected pace of him, but what he had was pace regardless, pace that was able to compete, while Seb usually had pace in the bottom half of the grid in every single race. But there is a problem with everything I am saying. It is extremely hard to judge them considering the SF1000 and the SF25 are night and day. What I am doing is looking at pace relative to their teammate, and in this lens, Seb is still the much slower driver. However, I will say this, it is kind of impossible to compare the two due to a more extreme factor. Where Lewis is still contracted next year and potentially beyond, Seb was literally fired before the first race got underway, and had the season not been cancelled due to the damn Pendic, he was still fired very early on in the season. This would obviously affect his mentality, since why try to perform when the team he loved most discarded him like he was nothing? Plus, he was getting beaten by a very young Charles. Like, at least Lewis is up against near prime Charles, so I'm sorry to all my Seb fans. While Lewis's season was not good at all, Seb's was even worse, leading to me saying Sebastian Vettel in 2020 had a worse season at Ferrari than Lewis Hamilton's 2025 season. So that was my verdict on Seb and Lewis's seasons. As a fan of both, man, this was tough to do, but surely it cannot get worse. Seb is retired, and I'd be damned if Lewis next year is even worse, so please, let 2026 be better. Anyways, I want to give a quick shout out to all members of the flock for their continued support. Make sure to join if you want cool benefits as well as just helping me out. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe since it really helps me out. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you think of this. And as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.